I'd like to welcome you here. Good evening. My name is Christopher Oscarson. I am Associate Professor of Interdisciplinary Humanities and the Director of the Scandinavian Studies Program. We welcome you here for the annual Loftur Bjarnason Lecture in Scandinavian Studies featuring Professor Pasi Sahlberg. We're grateful to have him here this year as this year's Bjarnason lecturer. We, that is the Scandinavian Studies Program, would also like to thank the co-sponsors of this lecture, the David M. Kennedy Center for International Studies, the Center for the Improvement of Teacher Education and Schooling at the McKay School of Education, and the Tanner Humanities Center at the University of Utah. This annual lecture in Scandinavian Studies is made possible by the generous donation of Professor Loftur Bjarnason, who was Emeritus Professor of Literature at the U.S. Naval Postgraduate School in Monterey, California, and a longtime friend of BYU. A descendant of Icelandic immigrants to Spanish Fork, he studied in Iceland under Sigurður Nordal, the most renowned Icelandic scholar of the past century. Professor Bjarnason was Secretary-Treasurer of the Society for the Advancement of Scandinavian Study and published a 2-volume anthology and a number of articles on the sagas and on modern Icelandic literature. He regularly taught a course on Icelandic literature for the University of California at Berkeley, and he was twice a visiting professor at BYU. In addition to enriching our Scandinavian collection and soliciting further donations to the Harold B. Lee Library from Iceland, Professor Bjarnason established an endowment to produce funds for student scholarships and a lecture series in Scandinavian studies. We would also like to recognize tonight individuals who have contributed in various ways to making this event happen, namely Aino Larson, the Scandinavian program's spectacular language coordinator, Kelly Blazian, the event coordinator at the Kennedy Center, and Robert Austin at the State Office of Education, who went to great lengths to organize meetings with the Lieutenant Governor, the State Superintendent of Education, and other leading policymakers at the state level. Educators and administrators from local school districts also attended a morning meeting that Robert helped to organize at the Capitol this morning. Now, it might seem strange that a Scandinavian Studies program at a university would sponsor a lecture about educational reform. This isn't usually what we're in the business of doing. Indeed, it may seem strange that there's a Scandinavian Studies program at all at a university thousands of miles away from Scandinavia, tucked away in the shadow of the everlasting hills in the Great Basin. The hallmark of our program, however, is interdisciplinarity. That is, crossing traditional boundaries, finding new connections and new partners to help understand what Scandinavia and Scandinavian culture has to offer more generally. The origins of this lecture tonight really go back to the Center for the Study of Europe, which was working together with the Kennedy Center a couple of years ago to put together a Teachers Institute to Scandinavia. And last spring, Wade Jacoby, the director of CSE, along with Laura Cook, led a group to Finland, Sweden, and Denmark, and helped, and you'll hear from some of these teachers a little bit later on, to expose them to a little bit about what Scandinavia had to offer, particularly in the areas of education reform and sustainability studies. That one thing led to another, and we asked Professor Sahlberg if he'd be willing to come out and speak to us, and he very graciously accepted to fit us into what otherwise is a brutally busy schedule that he keeps right now. So we're thankful that he'll be here. Pasi Sahlberg is a Finnish educator and scholar who's worked as a teacher, educator, and policy advisor in Finland, and was actively engaged in planning and implementing education reforms in Finland in the 1990s. He has served the World Bank in Washington, D.C., the European Commission, and the OECD as an external expert advising foreign governments in more than 50 countries around the world. His research interests include international education policies, education change, teacher education, and classroom teaching and learning. He is a board member of several educational organizations, including the Association for Supervision and Curriculum Development, the International Association for the Study of Cooperation in Education, and the Center on International Education Benchmarking. He's also on the editorial board of several prominent journals dealing with educational change and reform. He speaks around the world about educational improvement, enhancing equity and excellence in education systems, internationalization of education, and the future of schooling. He has a very long and impressive list of credentials, things that he's done, people that he's talked to, things that he's written. He's been the Director General of CIMO, the National Center for International Mobility and Cooperation at the Finnish Ministry of Education and Culture. He's an adjunct professor at the University of Helsinki and the University of Oulu, Finland, and currently he is visiting professor at Harvard University. He received the 2012 Education Award in Finland, and in 2013 the Graunmeier Award in the United States, and the First Class Knight of the White Rose in Finland in 2013. If you came tonight, though, for easy answers about how we can improve our educational systems, you are likely to be disappointed. Professor Sahlberg offers no silver bullet, nor any quick fixes. Instead, what he asks for is for us to examine priorities, to reevaluate practices, and reconsider what education means at a very fundamental level. The conclusions he comes to sometimes seem provocative, sometimes even counterintuitive. But he invites us to consider education not as a narrow technical practice, but as something that stands at the center of complex webs of social, economic, and cultural practices. We are delighted that he is here with us, and please join me in welcoming Professor Sahlberg.
Turn off lights, please.
What would you like?
It was good, yeah. Good. Good evening, everybody. Is it okay that I speak about 7 minutes and then I take questions for 5 minutes and then I go and watch my basketball team taking University of Northern Carolina and NCAA March Madness, 5:20. So thank you for asking me to speak here when my team is playing basketball.
Well, BYU conveniently lost.
I know that, yeah. Okay. It's wonderful to be here. It's really a great both honor and pleasure to have an opportunity to give this annual lecture and see so many of you here. I wonder why you came here. Can I see how many teachers do we have in the room? Okay, now I understand why you're here. Is anybody who is studying to be a teacher? Few, okay. Is anybody who is just a parent? Just curious about education. Wonderful, good. Okay, anybody who has been in Finland? Raise your hand. Oh my goodness, look at this, almost everybody. Can I speak Finnish to you now? I had a wonderful meeting with some of the students, and you speak so good Finnish that I could almost switch into Finnish. Wonderful. I'm going to speak to you now seriously probably about 40 minutes or so. I'm going to tell you the story of Finland and then leave you with 3 ideas. It's not going to be a silver bullet, but 3 ideas that I think could probably benefit this country if you were to take them seriously. Okay? But before I say anything else, let me say 2 or 3 remarks that I think are very important to keep in mind. Do you understand my English? Okay, it's good? Yes, because English is my 3rd language. We speak Finnish, and then Swedish is another language that we speak. So English is a 3rd one that I learned. So if you don't understand everything, it's my fault, all right? So the first one is that I didn't come here all the way from Massachusetts, where I live now, or Finland, to try to convince you that Finland has the best education system in the world. You know, this is what you often mistakenly read in the media, that if you open the newspaper, whenever there's something happening in education, people often say that Finland has the best education system in the world. Nobody in Finland thinks like this. Because, you know, simply we don't care how good we are in these international league tables. As long as we are better than Sweden, anything goes. But if you have a conversation with the educators in Finland, they really don't care about this, our rankings. This is not how we think about education. We think that education is something that we should be doing together, not against one another, but together with countries and teachers and others. And that's a kind of a problem nowadays, that too many, particularly politicians, seem to be thinking about education as a competition against one another. I know that you are competing against Idaho and some other states, but I think that we should rather think about education as a collaboration and networking and sharing and helping one another and try to do things that way. So that's number one. Then my second remark is that I really do not think that there is a kind of a recipe of solutions of quick fixes in any country, let alone Finland, that anybody can take as such and try to implement it in your own system. So what works in one education system doesn't necessarily work in any other, and that's why many people who come and visit Finland in the purpose of trying to understand what has made Finnish education system work well, make the mistake that they leave the country with a kind of a list of 5 or 7 things, and they say that when I get back home, I build a little Finland in my state or my district to try to do the same things that the Finns have been doing. This doesn't work at all. It's actually a very risky thing to do, and I'm never advising anybody to do that. So many people then they ask that, so what is this all about then? Why should we pay any attention to any other country but our own? And I'm often saying that we should be more concerned about whether we can learn from one another. Okay, so it's again this collaboration and sharing thing that, and there's so many lessons that we can learn from other countries and other systems. Which brings me to the third point here, which is that if you really want to understand where Finland, during the course of the last half a century, has found all those ideas and innovation and good solutions to make classrooms work and schools flourish and the system perform well, most of these ideas are from United States of America. Yeah, really. Many of those things that you see Finnish teachers and principals practice day in and day out initially come from here. And when I speak about this across this wonderful country here, people are kind of surprised that, so why those things are not practiced here in America? And that's exactly the same question that I'm asking, that why you are not using those things that have been very costly. You have spent billions of dollars of money for the research and innovation and developing these wonderful ideas that now the Finns, the Canadians and Chinese and Singaporeans and South Koreans and everybody else is using, but you are not making any benefit out of these things. And that's why I'm often warning people here when they kind of insist that the way to improvement of education here in America is to invest more money in innovation. I said, if you want to improve the education system in Finland, you better invest more money in new ideas and innovations here in America, because I want to be here one day and take those ideas from you and make it work at the level of the system. But you are not doing that, and that's a kind of an interesting thing, that where are all those ideas that you have been creating here in your universities and research institutions and elsewhere that everybody else has used to make their systems work, but you have done that not. So those are kind of 3 opening things that I want to use here. And actually, I want to dedicate this whole thing to my grandfather. This is my picture of my father's father, who was in this picture. He's 18 years old. It's taken, as you see, in the spring of 1914 in New York City. And he was one of those thousands of young Finns who, at that time of the history, left the country and came to America to. His interest was to get education. He wanted to have a good education. He was interested in engineering and technical things, and he got a great education here. And a few years later, 1917, Finland became independent. All the way until 1917, Finland was part of Russia. Oh, now we say that Russia was part of Finland. And then in the 1970s, we separated and we decided to let the Russia go and remain as an independent country. But he came in the early 1920s. He returned back to Finland as a young man. After having an education and being a war, he was sent back in Europe, serving the U.S. military. But he came to Finland and met my grandmother, and he never returned back. He took his iPhone and sent an SMS back to New Jersey, where he was working, and I'm not coming back home. Just ship my things, and I'm going to stay here in this wonderful country of Finland. But he remained a U.S. citizen until the Second World War, and when I was a little boy, he never spoke about war. That's a kind of an interesting thing. Those people who have been in war, they rarely want to talk about those things. He never spoke about anything about the war. That was a horrible thing for him. But he always spoke about the life in the United States and in New York and education that he received here. And in a way, I feel that I'm walking in his shoes in a way. Because about 10 years ago, I moved to Washington, D.C. I was there for 5 years, but I'm fine now. And you know, it's a kind of a story that was part of my grandfather's life as well. So this presentation is in his honor and whatever he was doing for the rest of us. But let me start by asking you this thing now, because there's so many people who have been. Most of you have been in Finland, but if you are one of the persons in this audience this afternoon, this evening, who hasn't been in Finland, so you must have some type of idea or image. Let me ask you, what do you see if you try to visualize, paint a picture of something, whatever you see when you think about Finland? What would it be?
Cold weather.
Cold weather. Okay.
Very clean.
What's that?
Very clean.
Yeah, but you have been there, right?
No.
No, you haven't. Okay. But you speak Finnish.
No.
Yes, you do. I know. Something else? Lakes. Okay. Tell me more.
Aurora borealis.
Aurora borealis. There was wonderful aurora borealis a couple of days ago in the northern hemisphere, and particularly Finland, northern Canada. Beautiful things, these northern lights. Something else. What else do you see?
I think of bicycling.
Bicycling. Finnish people are crazy with the bicycles. Yeah. Something else. Yeah.
Technological innovations, so not just
Okay. Technology, sauna. Does anybody see a reindeer? Anybody see a Santa Claus? Yeah. All right. You know what most people see, because you are a very advanced audience. You know much more than people normally do anywhere about these things. And you know, I've never had an audience here in the United States where so many people speak Finnish, which is a wonderful. But you know, this is what most people see when they think about Finland. They see nothing. Or then they see something that they explain that I cannot see anything because there's always darkness in Finland. Sun never shines there. It's not like in Utah where you have beautiful sunny days, but in Finland, because it's so up north, sun never shines, and that's why you see images like this. This is probably the most typical picture that you can imagine people who haven't been in my country and don't know much about this have. And you know, I'm showing you this because you know, if your image of Finland is like this, where there's always cold and snow and ice outside and darkness, sun never shines, how can you possibly have an education system that everybody, you know, claims to be the best one in the world? You know, once I was talking about the same thing here in another state, and somebody said, now I understand why Finnish kids are so good in these international studies, at testing reading and math and science. It's because of the climate. There's nothing else to do. You know what I mean? That you have to go to school, you stay indoors, and you do your math and reading and science stuff. Then you come back home in a bus, and it's so cold outside and dark that when other people go and play football and basketball and do hiking, Finnish kids stay indoors and they do their mathematics. There's nothing else to do in the country, right? Of course, this is not a real thing. But you know, the interesting thing is that people have a very different perceptions and ideas what the small country of Finland, 6 million people, less than 6 million people, and they speak a language that only 5 million people speak in the world. Okay, so it's a very, very special place. Okay, now, you know, if this was a meeting that took place 15 years ago, year 2000, first of all, nobody would know anything about education in Finland because it basically didn't exist. Yeah, so this whole story is fairly recent, okay? And this was the year when the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, some of you know, it's also known as OECD, decided to do for the first time a study that we now know by the name of PISA. Have you heard about PISA study? You know, some people, sometimes they introduce me as a Pasi Sahlberg, yeah, because I'm talking about those things. But PISA stands for Program for International Student Assessment, and it's the only kind of a global assessment at the moment that is including all the wealthiest nations, including United States, Canada, Mexico, Finland, and many others, and comparing what the 15-year-olds can do in reading, math, and science every 3 years, okay? So they're measuring these things every 3 years and comparing countries how well they do. You know, if this was a year 2000, just before the first study was conducted and the results released, there were a lot of speculation among people around the world that who will be those who are on the top of the international league table. So who are those who are the winners of the first OECD PISA study? Where the best education systems really are? Okay? And if this was a meeting of the education ministers from the wealthiest countries in the world, and I was asking here that raise your hand if you believe that your country is one of the best in the world when it comes to education. You would see about half of the people raise their hands. I'm quite sure that my country is somewhere there in the top. These included the Swedes, people from Sweden and Norway and Germany and England and Australia and New Zealand and many other places. Not necessarily the United States, because people know, the Americans know in the year 2000 that the system is not really where it should be internationally. But you know, the people who would have remained very silent in the room were the Finns. Because in Finland we were quite afraid actually before the first results came. We were afraid that we will be kind of embarrassing the whole nation by being the last in this competition, which is not a competition but comparison. Okay? So we didn't have any high expectations or hopes whatsoever. We just wanted to be somewhere there in the middle, just a little bit ahead of Sweden. Okay? And now I'm going to show you what happened in the first study that was like, you know, this data became public in December 2001, so it took a while to collect the data and analyze it. So now we are looking at December 2001, and this is how the world looked like. Oops. So this is the first results of the first OECD PISA study, and you will see that, oops, you know, Finland is there in the top, and many of those countries who raised their hands, they are somewhere here, not doing well at all. And when these results became public in December 2001, it was a huge surprise. You know, the whole world was like, what's going on here? Okay? Why some of these countries that believe that they will be doing well were not there at all? And who are these people? They're Finland and Canada and New Zealand, Australia, Ireland, South Korea. The countries that were not supposed to be there at all. You know, what made Finland particularly pleased was that Sweden was number 9. Sorry for all the Swedes in the room here. But, you know, we are brothers and sisters, so we make a lot of jokes about one another. Yeah. You know, I'm often saying that, you know, if this had happened to Sweden in the year 2000, what happened to Finland here? So if Sweden had been here on the top next spring, in the spring of 2002, was the year when you had the Olympics here, right? Okay. At the time of the Olympics here in Salt Lake City, you would probably at the same time have seen something like, maybe called like IKEA of education. IKEA of education, you know, these blue and yellow buildings where you can walk in and you can rent a wonderful Swedish principal to lead your school. Or you can go and purchase a science and math teacher from Sweden to show you how to really turn around your classrooms. But not in Finland, you know. Our reaction in Finland was that maybe the OECD made a mistake. Maybe they just measured Finland in a kind of a wrong way, and next time when they come with the same results, a similar study 3 years later, Finland will be where it was supposed to be, somewhere there in the middle where Sweden and Denmark and Norway and all the others were. And that's why, you know what? We said to ourselves that rather than thinking about these IKEAs of education and run around the world and say we have the best education system in the world, welcome to Finland and see what we are doing, we decided to do nothing. So let's wait for 3 years and see what happens after then. And if the same thing continues, then maybe there's something that we should be looking at, okay? And this is what happened 3 years later, okay? Finland continues there, now it's a math study, and you will see that we are there on the top, South Korea, Netherlands, Japan, Canada, Belgium, again there, and some of these countries that were hoping to be there on the top are nowhere near there, okay? But still in Finland, I remember the reaction there was that maybe the OECD made the same mistake twice. So let's wait another 3 years and see after 3 times where we are, because, in my country we have this saying that probably you have too, that nobody is so foolish that makes the same mistake 3 times, okay? So if it's still in a 2006 study, the same thing, then we start to do something and get together and start to figure out what's going on. And indeed, this is what happened. And this is where the Finnish story is really coming from. And this is not important that Finland is there number 1. What is important there is that there's a kind of there's almost like a pattern there, that some of these countries continue to remain there in a better part of this league table that is measuring different things about the 15-year-olds, and some of these countries continue to struggle there. They have not been able to improve what they do in their school systems. And 2 interesting things started to happen after this 2006 study. Then there has been 2009 and 2012 study, and the same type of pattern remains to be there. One question that people started to ask was that, so what's going on? What would explain the performance of these education systems, including Finland here? Why they are doing so well? Why do they continue to perform there in the top of the international league tables? Is there a silver bullet? Is there a list of 5 or 7 things that could be used somewhere else? The other question that people started to ask was that, what's going on in these countries? Why they are struggling? Why United States, England, Germany, Sweden, Denmark are not doing that well? What's going on there? So now the researchers are looking for the questions for these two answers. What is behind the success and why some systems are not able to get better? I've been doing a lot of research now with this latter one, the second question, what prevents some education systems from improving? Both of these questions are absolutely critical, okay? So now let me show you something about the Finnish thing. Are you doing all right, by the way? Is anybody sleeping in the room yet? No? If you see somebody sleeping there, just wake him or her up, because there's going to be good stuff coming for you in a moment, including that I'm going to ask you to sing with me in a moment. So get ready for that. Hey, don't go, don't leave. We're going to sing soon. All right. Okay, so what would explain Finnish success? And many people say that, okay, there are these 5 things. That Finland has great teachers and small class sizes and lack of immigrants and all these things. I don't think that the situation is that simple, okay? So my theory of understanding the case of Finland is divided by 2 different aspects of educational performance. One is that I argue that we really have to understand how the state as a whole is functioning. What's happening in Finland as a whole, in all other areas but education, before we can really understand why or why not education system is doing so well. So we have to look at the successful or failure of the state overall. I'm going to show you some things where I compare Finnish performance to the United States in some of the economic aspects of our 2 countries and economies. If you look at these economic competitiveness of the nation, this refers to the United States and Finland as an entire economy, or the technological advancement, sustainable competitiveness, this is more about the sustainable development, innovation as a whole, or good governance or lack of corruption. And you will see that Finland seems to be doing quite well compared to the United States in all of these important areas that are now compared globally around the world, okay? So this is something that your state legislators and politicians, and particularly the Washington DC, is using all the time when they are thinking about their economic or technological or innovation policies. They look at how the other countries are doing and what's going on there. And you will see that Finland is performing quite well, right? If you're somewhere there where America is in these things, you must be very good, because you are doing quite good as well. But these are the indicators that are even more interesting things. And now we are looking at some of the social indicators in our 2 countries, and remember that there are all these 200 nations are often compared with these things. And first of all, this is not unhappiness index. It's a United Nations happiness index, which indicates that Finns are among the happiest people, right after Danish people, Denmark. Is there any Danish people here? Okay, so Danish people are the happiest people in the world, followed very closely by Finland, right after the Denmark. But take a look at this. This is one of my favorite things here when we are looking at the United States. This political empowerment of women refers to the proportion or balance between men and women in our federal or state or central government. So now we are looking at how many women and men there are proportionally in Washington DC, in the House and the US Senate. So you will see that United States is not doing well at all. You have less than 20% women in both the House and Senate. Finland is one of the best countries in terms of empowering, giving political power and voice to women. Extremely important thing. Yeah. So I'm often telling my American sisters and brothers here that it's probably no wonder that it's so difficult to get any of these critical pieces of legislations or policies forward in this country that concern children or early childhood education or healthcare or anything like this, when the voice in political decision is so much dominated by men. If you come to Finland, and go to our parliament and ask any of our legislators that why Finland has been able to put forward all these favorable laws and policies for mothers and families and children and healthcare and all these things, the answer is always the same, that they are mostly laws and initiatives that were made by women, our female politicians. So that's why, you know, one way to improve these things in America is to get more women in power. Are you with me? Yes. Good. Now you are. Thank you. I saw that there are some gentlemen in the room who look a little bit concerned about this, but don't worry, you know, what's good for children and women is also good for us men in the long run. So that's why I think it's very important. We have a government now in Finland where we have a majority of government ministers are female, and in our parliament we have about 44% of our members of the parliament are women, which is a wonderful thing to have. I think it's very important to have this type of thing. This is a Save the Children Mother Index that the organization called Save the Children does every year. And now they continuously, as long as this index has been existing and done, Finland has been found to be the best country to be a mother. What does it mean? Well, of course it means that there must be some structures and policies and services in place that is helping mothers and young children to be safe and healthy and happy when they grow up, right? And that's why it's easy to see, you know, if you look at the United States here, you are far behind Finland in this respect, which means that in Finland we probably give our children before they even start schooling at the age of 7 a very good starting point. You know, we take care of them all the way until the age of schooling, and then they are ready to learn. Whereas in the United States, many of my colleagues tell me that the gap between those children who have access to these services and early childhood programs and those who haven't, by the time when these children go to school, is so big, so huge, that it doesn't matter how good the school is and how good teachers you have, that this gap cannot be closed because of the first 5 or 6 years of difference or inequality that is there in many communities here. So it's a very important aspect indeed. Thank you. And then finally, the UNICEF Child Wellbeing, Health and Wellbeing Index, where Finland is on the top of the world with the other Nordic countries. The number 1 and 2 and 3 are the Netherlands, Denmark, and I think Norway. So we are all there in a very top of this comparison. The United States is in the very bottom of the 29 countries that are compared there, which is not a good thing at all. And this again indicates that there are probably more important issues than educational issues in your education system that should be somehow handled before things can get better. Okay. So why I'm showing you this is that, you know, my conclusion of this is that maybe it is the society in Finland. Maybe it's not only the education system and great teachers and principals and other things. Maybe it's the entire society that is helping kids to learn in the school system. And if we want to understand and improve things here or in any other country, we have to look at those things also. Okay? So if you want to have this list of 5 or 7 or 10 things that you need to do to improve education here, some of those things have to come outside of the education. You just can't take the standards and curriculum and assessment and all these other things. You have to start to do some other things that come outside of the education system as well. Well, then the other one, you know, this other half of trying to understand the Finland's educational performance can be called something like smart education policies. There's some of these ways that fall into the education system that are very different than here in the United States. I'm going to show you just 3 because of the time that we have available. There are many others that we could speak about, and we can touch upon those in a panel. I'm going to speak about 3 kind of a central policies that have been particularly smartly designed in Finland during the course of the last 40 years. Okay, something that you can reflect on these with your own what you see in the United States in many parts here. The first one is that we believe in my country that we need to have a strong public system. Okay, and these are all important words. Strong public system, something that is a system that is primarily public education and that is strongly a well-led system. That's a common thing in all of the high-performing, successful education systems, not only in Finland. So it means that we have a system that looks like a kind of a coherent, simple scheme that is same for everybody, all the children. This is how the Finnish education system looks like. Okay, so you will see, and this is a new thing. Just a couple of years ago, we added the early childhood education as part of the education system. Before, 2 years ago, or a year ago actually, this was part of the social services, not part of the education. So now we have the children who are between 1 and 6 years old. They have access to early childhood education. Or any child or any family that needs these services, they have right to have high quality early childhood education for themselves. At the age of 6, Finnish kids go to preschool, and then they have 9 years of basic education. And this is really the cornerstone. This is the foundation of Finnish education system. And the interesting thing here is that we don't have any private schools or charter schools or any special schools that parents could choose if they don't want to have this public school. Everybody goes to the same school. So we insist that all the schools must be so good schools that parents are happy to send their kids there. We have about 75 schools outside of this system that are typically religious schools, or some of them are language schools, like we have a Deutsche German school, an English school, and Russian school, or there are Waldorf school or Rudolf Steiner schools, or the university schools where teachers are trained. But most of these 3,500 schools that we have fall into the same system. So children, we go to the same school system. There's no streaming or tracking here. They all have the same type of expectations and same standards and curriculum for all the kids. We don't do any standardized testing here like you do, most states and systems here in America do. We just try to educate everybody so that they are ready here when they're 16 years old, that they are ready to go forward. The compulsory education ends here. And this is an interesting thing. In Finland, when you're 16, you can do whatever you want to do. Okay? So high school is not compulsory. You can opt out and go to work or do whatever you want to do. And for those who don't know exactly what they want to do, we have this grade 10 here, so kids can go and attend the 10th grade. So here is the rest of the system, and you will see that we have vocational schools here. Almost half of the kids will go there, and then general, upper secondary, or high schools. Your high schools are here. This gives you access to academic research universities, and this leads you to polytechnics or universities of applied sciences. And we have about 60% of Finnish kids are going to university or higher education here. Many of them, they go to work here, they may come back here. What is a wonderful thing with this one is it's all publicly funded, including the higher education. So if you go to university or college in Finland, you never pay for that. So if there's anybody here in the room who is suffering or afraid of the high college tuition fee cost, you can send your kids or you can come yourself to study for free in Finland. We educate all the children in the world for free. And you know why? Because we think that education is a basic human right. Okay? So anybody who wants to have a free education in Finland, a higher education, can come there. There are not too many countries actually in the world who is doing this same type of thing. Norway is one. You can go to Norway and study for free. Germany is now offering free education tuition-free education for everybody, all the kids. And Finland is one of those. But most countries around the world, they are charging fees. Some of them are charging fairly high fees, like here in the United States, the tuition fee cost is going through the roof. Okay? So we believe that this is a good way to run the system. And we have, if you wonder whether Finnish parents are satisfied or happy with this, whether they would like to have a different system, there are very, 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 very few people, taxpayers or parents, who would say that, no, this is not a good idea. We need to have private schools or something else because we want to have a different education for our kids. More than 90% of our taxpayers, year after year, they report that they trust and they are confident and rely on this type of system here. So we are very happy to have something like this in place. Then the second one, the second smart policy is what I called equity, a strong equity policy. I don't know if you understand, have a kind of a meaning or definition for equity. Therefore, let me explain what I mean here by equity in education. Equity is simply, one definition for equity is that we see where the kids come from. Okay, so in other words, we look at the home, what type of home they have, what are the parents doing for work, what type of education they have, how much money, the wealth they have, how many books they have at home, how many times they go to foreign countries or holidays, and such things. And then we see that how do these kids who are coming from very different homes, and backgrounds and families, how do they do in education system? Okay, so if we have an education system where the wealth of the family or the socioeconomic status of the children's parents, if it's determining the kids how well or poorly they do in the school system, then we say that there's less equity in the school system, right? And if we have an education system where the family background and all these other things at home does not really matter that much, anybody can be successful, then we say that there's more equity in that system, right? Do you understand? Okay, so it looks something like this. You know, we can now look at two of these dimensions, and this is fairly new way of presenting this thing. So I'm looking at equity here in the horizontal line. So if we move from left to right here, it means that the equity in the education system gets stronger. Okay, so more equitable systems are here on the right, and when you move from the bottom here all the way to up, it means that the quality or learning achievement improves. Okay, so if you're somewhere here, it means that the kids learn well math, reading, and science. This is the average of these two variables. Okay, so if your country is here, the education system is here, that's a red zone. That's a very bad place to be, because it means that you lack equity and you also have a low quality, lower than average quality over there. So nobody wants to be there. If you're a minister of education or superintendent of any sort, this is not the place where you want to be. Okay, that's a very bad, problematic place to be. This is the place where you have a lot of quality, but you have problems with equity. In other words, if you are here, it means that some of your kids are learning well, but at the same time, the family background explains much of the poor performance in your system, right? Normally, the poorer kids don't learn that well if you are there. This is where you have a lot of equity but lower quality. So this means that the family background, the children's family background does not affect that much what they do in the school. And this is where everybody would like to be, right? So this one, where you have strong equity and strong quality, is the place to be, right? So if you are an education leader, that's where you aim at, okay? So you want to have a system with both of these qualities. So let me ask you this. If there was a thing called American education system, which doesn't exist, I understand that you have 50 states, they have 50 different systems, and you have about 15,000 different districts, and they have their own systems, and then you have independent schools there. So there are many systems within America. But if we think for a moment, America as a one education system, where do you think America would be? Which one of these zones, or wherever you would like to see the flag of your country? Think about it. Think about it a moment. You can tell your neighbor if you want to, if you have an idea. Just wake up your neighbor and say that there's something interesting going on here. Don't sleep, honey. Okay. So this is the place where everybody would like to be. This is where the United States is, according to the international data. Are you surprised? Yeah, because most people say that America must be here because everybody says that things are so bad here. But you know, I don't think that things are that bad. I think your school system could be better, but it's not broken. You know, if American system was broken, you would be here compared to other countries. I can tell you one thing, there are many education systems that you know very well that are there. Okay? So that's why keep this in mind, that your system needs improvement, but it's not a broken system. If you are there, it means that your public school system that consists of about 90% of your children are still in this country going to public schools. They're doing good job. And teachers in America every day are doing good job. But things could be better. Of course, you should aim at being somewhere there. And you know, this is Australia and this is England. Now somebody concludes that maybe if you speak English in your country, you are doomed to be somewhere in the average. Until you see this one, Canada. Wow. Canada is the highest performing English-speaking and French-speaking education system in the world. And now people are starting asking questions that, what the heck are Canadians doing to do so well? And they're so close here, just a couple of hours flight and you are in Alberta or Saskatchewan or British Columbia. They're doing wonderful things there. Many things to learn from Canadians. But guess what? Canadians have learned everything from you. They are employing there the American innovations every day to make things work as you see over there. Okay, you know, Canadians are so good that I often say that Canada is in heaven. Are there any Canadians in the room? 1, 2, 3. So you know what I'm talking about, yeah? Yeah. Canada is in heaven. You know, this is a heaven because this is a place where there's a high quality and high equity simultaneously. 15 years ago, most people didn't believe that it's possible. Most people say that you can either have high quality, but you have to sacrifice equity. You have to sacrifice some kids because they can never learn anything. Okay? Or if you want to have equity or equality, you cannot have a high quality there. Then you kind of dump down the standard and say that, you know, this is the level where everybody must perform and that's it. But that's it's a very wrong perception and belief. So now we know much more. And if you look at the other countries over there, you will see that you have South Korea, Japan, tiny little Estonia, and Canada there in heaven. Okay? The other thing that you will quickly see here, that if you take the Scandinavian countries, this is Norway, Iceland, and Sweden, and Italy. Italy is not Scandinavia yet. But you take all these 3 Scandinavian countries, and you know, they're a little bit like outliers. Interesting places because they have a lot of equity there. It means that the system is kind of a fair and equal to kids, but they have a kind of a challenge with the quality. They should be somewhere here close to heaven, right? But otherwise, you will see that there's a fairly nice kind of a relationship between these two things, right? And if you have done your statistics course somewhere during the course of your education, you understand that somehow this indicates that there's a correlation between these two variables, equity and quality, right? But remember, if you took the advanced course in statistics, you also understand that correlation doesn't mean causation, right? That you cannot conclude that if you have one, you will have another one. But it indicates that there's something between these two things because they walk hand in hand so nicely, okay? So it's worth of asking questions that, so how is equity and excellence or quality linked? How do they communicate between one another? Okay. Now, I see some people wondering that where's Finland? Yeah, do you know how Finnish flag looks like? Yeah, it's the most beautiful flag in the world. It's just like the other Scandinavian countries, but it's a white base and blue cross there. Okay, I'm going to show you where Finland. Okay, let me show this this thing first. Oh, you know how to call this? Stairway to Heaven, right? You probably remember this song. Yeah, it's a stairway to heaven. That's where all these countries try to go. And you know, this is where Finland was in mid-1970s. We had a very different school system then, and we decided to change everything and make sure that every child, every kid has a good school and a good teacher wherever they are, or wherever they come from. And we started to build a system that looks very different, that looks like, as you see now. And this is the way of Finland. Wow. Straight to middle of heaven. That's where we are. There are now 5 heavenly nations or education systems in the world where equity and quality meet. Nobody else is quite there. Sometimes people say that maybe Shanghai or Singapore or Hong Kong would be a good models for the United States of America. But you know, I appreciate what these countries and people are doing there, but they are not really good models for you. Why? First of all, Singapore and Shanghai, they have a huge issue with equity there. Okay? So they're working for trying to make their education systems equitable. Those two systems are good for some kids, but they are not good for all of the children. And I think here in America, you need a system that is good for everyone, all the kids. Following the Thomas Jefferson's ideal and many others after him, that education has to be serving the equal opportunity for all Americans, okay? So let's take a look at this one. Do you know who is this country? The Netherlands. Yeah, this is Dutch. You know, the Dutch, they are so they're so close to heaven that I often say that the Dutch they're knocking on heaven's door. You remember this song? How about singing a little bit? Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Louder, people. Come on. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Beautiful. One more time. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. And last time, everybody. Knock, knock, knocking on heaven's door. Thank you so much. I was in the Netherlands the other day talking about this, and I said that, you know, when I look at you Dutch people and how you do, they have a wonderful education system, that you are really like knocking on heaven's door. And what you need to do now is to find the key. Where is that? And to find the key means that you need to work even a little bit harder on equity. Okay? Put equity before quality in your education policy and improvement. In other words, ask how you can make the system even better for serving for all the different kids. Okay? And that's the lesson for the United States here. If you want to climb this stairway to heaven, it means that you cannot go there by just improving standards and assessments and computers, ICTs and all these things. You have to work much harder on this equity thing here. First of all, you need to understand better what equity really means in education. It means that you need to fund, you know, give the resources that you are now giving to the schools throughout this wonderful nation more fairly. You know, guys, what you do right now is that you fund inequity. Because if you have a school in a wealthy neighborhood, they get more money than the school in a poorer neighborhood. And it should be exactly the other way around, just like Finland is doing. That we are discriminating schools in terms of funding, but we call it a positive discrimination. So if we have a school that needs more resources, that has more immigrant kids, more those children who don't speak Finnish, or more kids from the unemployed or single-parent families, we give those schools more resources, but you don't. You do exactly the opposite thing. We give every school, every child, every day, everywhere in Finland, a free 3-course healthy meal every day. We are not asking where you come from or whether you can afford or cannot afford this. We give it to everybody. Every school in Finland has a nurse and a medical doctor there to make sure that every kid goes through a medical health check every year, everywhere, in every school. We check their teeth, make sure that everybody is feeling good. You know, here in America today, the most common reason for being away from school is dental problems, okay? If your teeth are aching, you cannot learn. So we are taking care of those things within the school system. We are funding a special education program in Finland so that we are detecting early on all those possible problems and difficulties that kids may have if they are about to learn things. Okay? Here in America, you have special education, but you wait a long time before you start to help these kids. And we have 3 times more children in special education in Finland than you have here in America, which means that we have much more sensitive way of, you know, helping kids early on, and many other things. And finally, I think an important thing is that we are having a kind of a whole child approach throughout the school system, meaning that music and arts and physical education, social studies are equally important than math and reading and science. Very important thing. So it's a kind of a policy or program that you can have if you want to. But remember, equity is not a project. You cannot have a 3-year project to fix equity in this system. It's something that has to be a permanent way of investing in better education for everybody. And finally, this is my last thing here, is the good teachers. And we think very differently in Finland about teachers and how to prepare and how to find teachers. Let me tell you a little bit about that. This is my niece, my sister's daughter. And when she was in high school, she was leaving the high school about the age of 19 or something like this, about this time of the year, when she was taking the final examination in a high school. Remember that we have only one standardized, external standardized assessment or test in Finland, and it's at the very end of the high school. And she had just completed the final examination that spring. She called me and said that, "Uncle, I have decided to become a primary school teacher." And she was a very, very good student. She had highest marks on almost everything. She was doing music and dance and sports and anything you like. And she asked me, how do I get there? And we have, if you want to become a primary school teacher in Finland, you have to study a master's degree in one of our research universities. There's one program and 8 universities offering these programs. There's no other way. We don't have a Teach for Finland or anything like this, where you can have a short way, kind of a shortcut to work as a teacher. That's not possible. Just like in a law or medicine that everybody has to complete the same program. So I told her that, you know, you're just about the perfect candidate that we are looking for in our teacher education programs. So go there and be yourself. 3 months later, she called me and she was desperately in tears. And why she was crying? Because she just received a letter from the University of Helsinki saying that, unfortunately, you are not qualified. And she wanted to know what to do. And I said, tell me first, what was the admission to the university? What happened there? And she said, well, there were 3 parts, she said. 3 things that they had to do. The first was the written exam that everybody had to take in the end of the spring, where the applicants, they had to read a book that contained 6 or 7 scientific papers about education and pedagogy and all sorts of other things. And they had to read the book and then take the pen and paper exam where they had to show that they understand what they were reading. And she said, I was doing very well with this because I was a good student, so I can read fast and understand what's going on. So she was invited to the second phase, okay? And in the second phase, they only invite about 3 times more applicants that finally will be selected or accepted them. And I said, what was the second phase like? And she said that, well, we were asked to go into a room with 3 or 4 other students, applicants, and then there was a panel sitting there like this, and they gave us a task, and the task was to design a math class for 4th grade on this topic. And they were working half an hour there, and the panel was making all sorts of observations and seeing what they do, how they communicate, how they collaborate, how creative they are, and how they can, you know, take further the other people's ideas. And they have a kind of a rubric of things that they are observing there. And then she said to me that, you know, I'm very good in these things because I have 3 younger siblings and I've been planning these things for them all my life. So she was invited to the 3rd and final phase. So I knew that the problem was there. So I asked her to tell me what was the most difficult thing that they asked there. And this third phase is an individual interview where she's sitting against before the 3 professors and lecturers from the School of Education, and they ask questions. And she said that the most difficult question probably was when one of them asked, so Vera, why did you come here? Why do you want to be a primary school teacher? Because you could be a lawyer or a doctor or businesswoman or whatever you want to do. What makes you come here? And I said, what did you say? And she said, well, I didn't think about this too much, so the only thing that came to my mind was that my uncle is a teacher. And then she remembered that her mother is a teacher too, and grandfather was a teacher, and then she concluded that maybe teaching is something that runs in the family, you know. And then one of the panelists said, is there anything you would like to add to this? And she said, yeah, I love children, she said, which is the wrong answer, of course. You know, if you say that I love children, it means that you really don't know what you're talking about. Of course you love children if you go to teaching. Everybody loves kids, right? But, you know, I've been sitting there in this panel several times, and if anybody tells me that I want to be a teacher because I love kids, I know that you really don't know what you're talking about. It's a nice thing to say, but it doesn't really mean a thing, okay? So that's why they didn't take her. She didn't know what drives her to teaching. So she asked me that, so what should I do? Because I really want to be a teacher. I feel that this is what I want to do in my life. And I said, go and work as a teaching assistant somewhere and, you know, learn more about, you know, what teachers do and how they think, how they feel about these things. And if this is really what you want to do, apply again and talk about it. This is exactly what happened. She applied again. They asked her the same question, and she spoke about how she felt about being a teacher and making a difference in young people's lives, better in a classroom than in a courthouse or in an operation room. And she was accepted, and now she graduated a couple of years ago, and she will be one of those young Finns who will be a teacher for life. She will never leave. This is her dream job to do, and she will never do anything but teach. Maybe in a different schools, or maybe she will be a principal one day, but she will stay in education all her life, okay? And we have 8,500 people like my niece every year. This spring, as we speak, in a country of 6 million people, there are 8,500 young people like her who desire to become primary school teachers. And guess what? Only 800 of them will be successful. 1 out of 10, okay? So there's more tougher competition to become a primary school teacher in Finland than a lawyer or doctor. So if you just want to get into the higher education, you go to law school because it's easier to get there than become a primary school teacher in Finland. That's tough is the competition. And you know, these people, they study normally 5 years. 5 years is optimal. Normally it's about 6 years of full-time academic research-based study. Okay? And when they study these 5 or 6 years, they do all sorts of these things that American teachers, most of the teachers will never study a thing, the primary school teachers. So this is what makes the Finnish primary school teachers very, very different. They are truly professionals, just like lawyers and doctors when they enter into their first job. Okay? And in Finland, we think that the primary school teachers are the most important teachers in the entire school system because they lay the foundation for young people to do what they want to do. This is how it looks like if you look at the whole this century since the 2000. You will see that we have had a increasing number of applicants. This is this 8,500 roughly here. And this increase here, this is the total applicants. These are the females, these are the boys here. And this is very much because of the economic crisis that Europe and Finland has had now. Whenever there's a bad economy in our country, there are more people likely to go to public sector occupations. Okay? When things are good, some of these people will go and they work, study economics or business or something like this. So that's where it is. And this is the line of accepted. So it's always been about 800 every year that we recruit. And the beautiful thing in this system is because this is a free education, remember, it's paid by the government, is that if you get the job, you will, if you get accepted there, you will get the job for sure. It's 100% guaranteed to find a job if you are one of those students. You know, people often here in America tell me that what Finland is doing is an extraordinary thing in education because you are selecting recruiting all these students like my niece from the top 10 or 20% of your recruitment pool. Do you see what I mean? You often hear this here that America should seek for the best and the brightest into teaching, just like Finland is doing, but that's completely wrong idea. So those people who say something like this, they don't understand a thing what Finland is doing, because we are not doing that. I'll show you what we do. Okay, here you see this is the academic scale of students who are applying to primary school teacher education. These are the really bright kids. So they have the academic scores are close to 100 is a maximum. So this 20% here represents those who are really good academically. They are math and reading and science and foreign language, all these things are very, very high. These are the kids that may be good in some other things. You know, often if you are here, it means that you are a good hockey player or basketball player or you're a good actor or musician or something like this because you love music more than school, okay? But you still want to be a teacher. So everybody else here. So if Finland was doing what you often hear here to do, then you know most of these 800 students would be recruited right here. You know what I mean? You know, we have so many applicants there. We have 10 times more applicants than we can take in. We could easily just take the best ones. We could just easily recruit these 10% and they would be all very smart and bright kids. But we are not doing that, okay? This is what we do. This is how it looks like, the kind of academic profile of the first year freshman at the University of Helsinki. This is the same thing in the whole country. It's fairly close to the normal distribution here. And you will see that only 1 out of 4 in that university come from the top 20%, okay? So 25% or 24% in this case are the so-called the smartest kids or best and the brightest kids, okay? Then we have, where is my, oh, I don't have it here, okay. Then we have, you know, this represents this bottom half is about another quarter, okay? So this is 24% here. So half of the kids who are in a teacher education program are just the average normal students. So who are these? These are the kids who are potential good teachers, but they are not academically strong. And this is something that you need to understand, is that to have good teachers in your school system doesn't mean that you need to recruit the best and the brightest academically. You have to find the best people who are able to do the job very well. So, you know, I often hear this statement people are saying here in America and everywhere that the quality of an education system cannot exceed the quality of its teachers. I think it's a myth. You know, if you look at Finland, this doesn't apply in Finland for sure, because we think that the quality of an education system can actually exceed the quality of its teachers if we understand teaching in a school as a team work, as a team sport. It's like a football team, okay? A football team can win championships and be very good even without having the best and the most powerful players there. If you have a leadership, if you have a mission, you have a coach, and you have an idea what to do together, you can do much more than you could. So finally, last minute or two, what the US can learn from Finland? This is a kind of ultimate question here. I have 3 things that I'm offering you to take away from this evening and think about if you wish. The first one is that I think you need a long-term investment and understanding what equity in education means. Now there are many people, increasing number of people in America who talk about equity, but you are not really doing too much, or you are not systematically investing in equity. And just like in a business, if you want to have a return, you have to make an investment, right? You cannot expect that you can have more equity or quality without investing anything in any way. So you have to do that systematically. And you know, these are some of those things that you heard already before, that just like you are improving quality of your education system by doing these things, you have to do some of those things that I was talking about earlier if you want to have this path of increasing performance, improving performance of your education system. That's the only way. That's the best way to do that. That the equity is having the similar priority as the quality is having now in many of the American states when the improvements and investments are made. So invest more in this equity part of the system. By the way, if you want to have these slides, I'm tweeting them about right now in Twitter. So I'm going to show you the Twitter address if you want to download this and look at. You can do that later. Lesson number 2 is that I think that you should have a smarter student assessment and data policies here. I think you are testing too much of your kids, not only in this state in Utah, but you are testing your kids too much overall in America, okay? And that's why I'm not against standardized testing, but I'm just critical against the overuse and over-reliance of standardized assessments that do not really relate into students' learning. So 3 things related to this smarter assessment policies. One thing that I think that you could move from is what I call a census-based standardized testing towards sample-based student assessments. Okay, so this is what Finland is doing. This is like your NAEP assessment. This is what Canada is doing, and many other countries are getting the data more increasingly by doing a sample-based assessments rather than census-based standardized testing. So it's doable, and you can do that. The second one is that you should move from test-based accountability to a trust-based responsibility. Trust-based responsibility is something that Finland is doing, and test-based accountability is something that is common in many parts of the United States. And these are 2 very different things. The latter, this one refers to professionalism and trust in teachers, their kind of ability to assess and evaluate students. This is much more about bureaucracy and measurements outside of the school system. And thirdly, I think you can move more from the data-driven decision-making to what I call a collective human judgment of performance, okay? And this would, of course, this collective human judgment should include also information from data and evidence. So I'm not talking about just abolishing all of these things. But there are several things that this country can easily do, because you can do these things much better than anybody else if you just want to do it. And finally, children must play. You know, people, it breaks my heart when I look at these things taking place in many parts of America when kids don't have an opportunity to play anymore. We have stolen the time for them to have a recess outside of the schoolyard away, and we are insisting young children to stay long hours home with the homework and doing things and sitting down. You know, the seat work in this country and in Asia, just like in China and Singapore and many other countries, is exceeding 10 hours a day with the little kids. And you have probably heard about this, that there's a saying now that sitting is a new smoking. And some of your experts here in America have concluded through research that if you sit approximately 10 hours every day, whether you're a kid or adult, it equals to being a smoker in terms of the risk that it has to your health. So I'm often asking that, do you want your 10-year-old to be a cigarette smoker if you insist that they are sitting doing a seat work 8 or 10 hours a day? It's simply too much. So what are the consequences here in America? You know, this is another thing that has been surprising to me and really breaks my heart. That I hear about a thing called ADHD. This is like attention disorder when the kids they cannot calm down, but they have to move and climb the tree and do all these things. I'm often saying that in Finland we have the ADHD, but we call it a childhood. It's something that you normally, just like here, that you get it when you're about 3 or 4, but then it disappears when you're about 17, 18. Some people have this childhood still when they're 25 or 30 years, but most people get rid of it when they get older. But here, look at this. You have 6.1% all kids in America under medication. And you have about double of this number kids in America identified, diagnosed to have ADHD. Millions of young people. If you are poorer and non-white here in America, your likelihood to have ADHD is double or triple. Okay? So, what are we talking about here? This is your state here. So you are in kind of a parasite here. But you still have, in Utah, about 6% of your kids have identified to have the ADHD. And when you move east, you will have that some of these states have huge. Sometimes I say that the closer you are the Washington, D.C., the more ADHD there is. I don't know, tell me why, okay? But, seriously speaking, this is a huge issue. I'm not saying that this is something that is just a fabricated thing, but I just can't believe that America can have such a huge number of ADHD children when the other countries don't, okay? But if you do, then you have to do something about it. And something that you can do in the school system is to make sure that your kids can play, that they can have time to go out and climb the tree. I was talking about this the other day, and I said, in Finland, every kid, they go out when there's a recess for 15 minutes, and they climb the trees and these things. And somebody said, so what happens if the child climbs the tree and falls down? The principal that I was talking to said that this kid would probably not do it again. And the cost for this country, for this thing alone, is more than $40 billion. Just to take care of, medicate truck these little kids that should be given time to play and hang around. I think it's a horrible thing to have. I'm not saying that there's no ADHD. There must be some kids that need help and also medication, but it cannot be that magnitude. That's a wrong thing to do. So this is how a typical Finnish school day looks like if you look at the 4th grade. And you will see that every child in every school, by law in Finland, must have 15-minute recess, a lunch, and 15 minutes break between the classes so that they go out, they put their boots on and coats on, rain or shine, and they do their things there independently. They can do whatever they want to do, of course, under the supervision of teachers, but it's a kind of an unstructured time for them to play. It's a very, very important part of the thing. I want to close here and say a couple of things about this thing. There's I'm going to show you play you some music. I know that some people don't like this, but it's a Finnish music. This is a Finnish evening. So, there's a thing called Eurovision Song Contest. Have you heard about that? Yeah, so every country will send the best representative, something that they hope will win the whole thing. And this year it's going to take place in Vienna, Austria. I'm going to play you the song that will represent Finland there this year. And this is a song that was composed and will be performed by a group of 4 men that you will see here. And all these 4 men, they have a developmental disability. 2 of them have Down syndrome, and 2 of them have some other problems. These 4 guys have been institutionalized for a long time until they realize that there's a way out of this institutionalized thing through music. And they formed this band, and they wrote this song that is 1 minute and 40 seconds long. It should be 3 minutes and 45 seconds, but they say that it takes too long time to play 3 minutes and 45 seconds, so that's why they have only 1 minute and 42 seconds there. And they are singing in Finnish, but you will see the subtitles there. But when you look at this, just think about Finland as a country that is brave enough to send a group like this, it's a punk music. It's not really my type of music, but I love this idea that these guys will be there representing our little country with a very, very different approach. And actually what they want to do, they say that we want to send a message to the world that we can do these things also. This is not only for the beautiful and young people and smart people, this is for everybody. And so I'm going to play you this and then finish. But just take a look at this, and I hope that you are not disturbed about this punk music over there. So I sincerely wish all the best for these guys when they're performing in the end of May in Vienna in this competition, and that they will send a message to the world that, you know, it doesn't matter how you look like or who you are. If you love what you do, that's what we should be doing. And I thank you very much for your coming here and your attention. This is my Twitter account, so this presentation with the slides will be there or on my website if you want to go and revisit once again. And once again, thank you so much, people, for coming.
Okay, we have time now for some questions. We'll do question and answer for maybe about 7-8 minutes, and then we'll take a quick break if there's some people that need to slip out before we do about a half-hour panel presentation. We have a group of teachers who spent some time in Finland this last spring who are going to talk a little bit about some of their experiences and their experience in terms of implementation, especially here in Utah. So if you'd like to ask a question, we ask you to come down here to the microphone over here on the on your right-hand side. You can form a line kind of behind there.
Can you please tell us?
You turn the microphone on.
Can you please tell us the amount that Finland spends in US dollars per student per year in education, and compare that with the amount in US dollars that the US spends? And perhaps, I know you've been very thoughtful in preparing for Utah. Please tell us how far down the totem pole we are in terms of spending per pupil per year. We rank 50th out of 50 states. I think we're behind Guam as well.
Yeah, I think you have one of the lowest spending. Yeah, I don't know about your state, but the United States is spending. It depends a little bit how you calculate. You know, if you take the cost of primary school and high school kids is very different. Or if you take the higher education things, that's a completely different thing. But if we talk about K-12 education, I think in the United States they often use the value of about $10,000 a student per year, and in Finland, it's about $7,000, $7,500. So it's a relatively cheaper, less money for that. If you look at the GDP, the proportion of the GDP that the spending is, I think in America it's about a little bit more than maybe 7.2%. In Finland, it's about 6.4 or something like this. That represents the same type of ratio of spending in education. But I know that this state has you are lower, and you're proud of that, right?
Well, you generate PISA points per dollar I calculated something like 40 or 50% higher than the United States.
Right, yeah. Yeah, but you know, I can tell you one thing, or two things. One is that equity is not cheap. Okay, so if you believe in equity and want to invest, make an investment in equity in order to get a return, you need the money for that. You cannot have a cheap equity program. All of these things that I mentioned cost money. Some of them cost a lot of money to put in place that you have there. The other one is that innovation is not cheap. So if you want to have an education system that is able to renew and create new things, it needs an investment, and that's why you can run any system cheaply. Just run it, just do it, things every day as you do. But I think that that's not enough nowadays. Maybe it's not enough in this state. Certainly it's not enough in Finland. What we need to do is that we need a kind of a serious investments in the system. But we need to also understand where are the best places to put the money. The interesting thing here is I'm meeting a lot of people from the houses of representatives here across the United States, and I always ask this question that where does the money go? Regardless of how much money you spend in education, but where does it go? What do you get out of this money? Or who is spending this thing? And nobody really knows where it goes. For example, simple question is that in your education payroll, how many of those people who are paid through education budget are actually working in the school, doing something with the kids here in America? Do you know? Somebody told me that it's about half, every other person. So half of the people are working have nothing to do with the kids. They're in a bureaucracy and running things and doing these things. In Finland, it's about 95% of people who are in education payroll are actually in the school, doing things every day for kids. And that is the one thing that explains why American system costs so much money. The other thing that you have that is a minor part of it's about 10% of your annual spending in education. It's still, it's a significant amount, is the fact that about half of your teachers who start their careers as teaching leave the profession before the end of the 5th year. And this thing that you have so rapid turnover of new teachers cost you about $7.5 billion every year. This is education money that the educators have to spend. And it's more than 10% of your annual spending on education. Huge waste. It's just like burning cash, the smoke in the air, because you don't need to have that. If you had a system like Finland has, where we do not replace and recruit new teachers and train them, you could spend that money, you could spend $5 billion every year out of that money to help teachers to do better in their schools. It would make a huge difference. $5 million every year for professional development of people who teach kids would be a big thing. But now this money goes to recruiting new people, because there's so many people who leave the school because they cannot take it anymore. Okay, and many teachers tell me that they leave because they cannot take this standardized testing anymore. It's too much. It's hurting my children, my kids, and I don't want to see it anymore. That's why enough is enough for me. Find somebody else to do my job. $7.5 billion.
I have a lot of questions.
Take one at a time.
Okay,
so
one at a time. Is this on?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. So here in the United States, most of the people who make education policy are not in the classrooms. And I'm wondering, is that true in Finland? The people who are deciding on education policy, are they educators or are they elsewhere?
Well, it's a good question, because the policymakers in Finland are not necessarily educators. But most of the education policymakers in this country are lawyers. Sorry about that. I know that there's some lawyers in the room. I have a lot of respect what you do, but if you have too many lawyers deciding these things, it's not going to look necessarily something that is good for the kids. But just to give you an idea of the legislators, the policymakers that we have in our national parliament, we have 200 members of the parliament in Finland, and 35 of them are former teachers. I had a dinner last night with one of the members of the House of Representatives called Carol. Yeah, so she was sitting next to me, and I asked her the same question: how many? Because she's a long-time school teacher, English teacher. I said, how many people there are like you, making policies, who has experience from school? And she said, I think she said 3, something like that, which indicates that there's not really enough experience and kind of a perspective in policy making. We probably have a little bit better situation in our administration. If you come to our Ministry of Education, that is responsible for the policy, many of those people have teaching background, that they come from education, they have been school principals or something like this, but there's still all sorts of things, all sorts of people there. But I get your point. I think that here, the other interesting thing here in the United States is that you have many of the superintendents here in this country do not have any educational experience. Are there any superintendents in the room? Not anymore. But these people often have a very different, they have business background or they are lawyers or something like this. But in Finland, you cannot become a superintendent of the district in education unless you come from education experience. So most of them are former principals and teachers. And that's what brings a very different perspective into policy making as well when you have this experience there. Unless there's, is there anybody else who would like to? Can we take this one over here? Okay. Yeah.
I had a question about the special education. Are the children with special needs integrated?
Yes. The question is that are the special needs children integrated in the classroom? 99% of them are. And it's sometimes parents may request something different if there are better services. Like in Helsinki, for example, there are some schools that have much smaller classes and more experts and specialists in a school. Some of the students are there because their parents were asking the authorities that if their child could be taken away from their own school and moved to the special school because they get more services there. But all the other kids are integrated and included in a normal classroom. We have this inclusive education idea just like you have here.
Well, but here's more here the parents have to fight for the children to be included.
It seems like here very often the parents really have to, fight for the children to be included rather than them automatically be included. Very often they try to put them in the special education classroom, so it seems quite opposite.
Okay.
I like it.
Yeah. It's Finland is. We have 3 levels of special education, like 3 phases. The first one is the very kind of early, it's called early support or something like this, which means that the school can start to do this immediately, and the child will remain in a normal classroom. Then the third one, the kind of a more substantial form of special education, is when there is a decision that the child will receive a full-time special education, and it's often taking place in another place than his or her own classroom. But this is always done in a consultation with parents, and sometimes even with the child, so that yeah, exactly. The parents may request whatever they want to see the best, and schools are trying to, accommodate those expectations to the decisions.
You have time for one more.
I have 2 questions.
Take one at a time.
One at a time.
Yeah.
You said that equity costs money, and we had comparisons of GDP and cost per pupil, etc. But if you just said, what is the average income tax rate for a Finnish taxpayer?
Mm-hmm.
And what is the spread between the wealthiest earning Finnish person and the, if you will, lowest average?
Yeah.
In other words, the compression between.
Yeah. Good question. You're talking about income inequality in Finland. And that's one of the smallest within the wealthy nations. The Finland and Japan and I think Norway and Denmark. We are the countries where the income inequality is the smallest, meaning that the gap between the wealthy and the not so wealthy ones is the smallest. America is in the other extreme, that the income inequality, as you know, in this country is bigger than it has ever been before. So that's one thing. Then your first question was, the income, yeah. This is another interesting thing, because, if this was a meeting 15 years or 20 years ago, I would have told you that our income tax rate is 45% on average. But now the taxation system has changed a lot, and we have shifted some of the income taxes away from the income to the indirect taxation, so that people, when they're consuming things, they're paying more taxes out of those things. So we have a value-added tax that everybody has to pay the same way, and that's why we have the income tax rate is now lower than it used to be. If you're a primary school teacher in Finland, let's say that you're both primary school teachers in Finland, or kind of average middle class jobs, your tax rate would probably be for both adults something like probably between 30 and 33%. I can tell you one thing, that now when I'm here in the United States, in Massachusetts, I pay more taxes here than I paid in Finland. And in Finland I had a good salary. But the difference is that in America I don't get anything. You know, I don't get education, I don't get health, I get nothing out of those things. And in Finland, remember, you get a free education for everybody, including your American brothers and sisters, if they want to study in Finland. Healthcare and dental care, everything is covered. So I think this has changed a little bit during the last 15, 20 years, that our income tax rate has lowered, and in many other places, like many of my fellows here in America, they pay same rate of taxes if you include the property tax and all the other things that you is out of your pocket. At the end of the year, your tax rate is about the same here than it is in Finland from the same job. So that has changed.
Okay, since sitting is the new smoking, I invite everyone to stand up real quick. We'll invite our panel to come down here. Corey Leonard, is Corey? Yeah. Corey's going to briefly introduce the panel. I promise that we're going to be done and out of here by 7 o'clock. But we'll hear a little bit more about implementation, and then those who would like the opportunity afterwards to speak a little bit more with each other, and even Professor Sahlberg, we're going to be having a reception over in 238 of the Kennedy Center that you can join us there at 7 o'clock. 238 in the Kennedy Center. If you want, you can, since I know that we'll be losing particularly some students here, you can move down as well if you want to be a little bit closer to the action.
Part of the principal's job is to supervise and help teachers to teach better. Yeah, me too. Right? That's, in general, it will be very difficult to do unless you have a principal who is very experienced in teaching. I just don't believe that anybody can give me any advice.
Okay, we'll invite you to take your seats again. Okay, the person who's going to be introducing our panel is Corey Leonard, who's the Assistant Director for the Kennedy Center for International Studies here. He was involved in this Teachers Institute that he'll tell you briefly about to introduce our panelists.
So last summer, our Center for the Study of Europe sponsored their second annual Europe Teacher Institute, which was held across Scandinavia. And these fine educators represent a cross-section of the 20 educators who participated in that program. They had an opportunity to delve in much greater depth, and starting in the preparatory course, to read Pasi Sahlberg's book, along with a few others, and to prepare for what was a very interesting professional development seminar. So let me just briefly go down the list and introduce. I'm not going to do this in order, so maybe raise your hand as I read your name. First, Anne-Marie Harrison, who's with Provo School District. Russ McKell, Summit High School. Linda Davis, Hillsdale Middle School. Ralph Jamsa, who is one of our Finn-speaking teachers as well at Salem Hills High School. Patty White, There we go. Morningside Elementary is what I wanted to say. Marinda Davis, Lakeridge Junior High School, and Jesse Lofgren. Sorry, Jesse, with Bonneville Elementary. So our distinguished moderator, Bruce Eschler, teaches at Hillcrest Junior High. No pressure, but this group has already presented 3 times to the legislature, and they've come outstanding. So, Bruce, we'll turn the time over to you.
As Pasi indicated at the beginning, the point of this panel, dead battery. I'll go to that mic. Sorry, battery. But as Pasi indicated in the beginning, the point of this panel is to talk about lessons that we can learn. Just like Finland learned lessons from other countries, what lessons have we learned from Finland? As has been mentioned, the panelists are from a diverse group of districts and also from a diverse group of backgrounds, both in the classroom, outside the classroom. So our first question we'd like to tackle is, what lessons or principles from the Finnish education system have you been able to implement into your practice, and why have you adopted it? Who would like to go first? Oh, no.
Okay, I'll start.
Okay.
I was going to suggest, Pasi, when you said that you're not sure what you got for your taxes in Massachusetts, well, you got the smartest bombs. You might have the smartest kids in Finland. We have the smartest bombs. I'm not sure that's a good trade-off, by the way. Being facetious. One of the things that we've done as a direct result of our trip to Finland in our high school is my principal is a very progressive man, believes in revolutionizing education as I do, and we looked at the grade level where students seem to have more of a choice. In Utah, compulsory education goes to 18, and we think that's counterproductive. And so one of the things we're promoting with the district office, we've already presented to the folks up there, and they kind of raised their eyebrows, thinking we might be going over the edge here, but is allowing students to graduate with fewer credits. Because right now in the state of Utah, you have to have basically 16 and a half core classes, and then the rest are electives. And we've reworked our schedule completely. And so one of the things we're trying to do is give students more autonomy after their sophomore year to make decisions whether they're university-bound or college-bound. We don't want to suggest technical or vocational-bound because a lot of parents are turned off by vocational verbiage. So anyway, that's one of the things we're doing pragmatically at our school, is trying to create a clear path for technical programs that are obviously very valuable in our economy. So that's what we're doing at Salem Hills High School.
Thank you.
Who else would like to tackle this question? We'll take one more on this question before we move on to the next question. Marinda?
Okay. So in my classroom, one of the things that I've started doing as a direct result is reevaluating the grading system. Because one of the things I found very interesting talking to the educators in Finland was that they put grades in twice a term or a quarter, once like halfway through and then once at the end. And so taking from that, that's kind of, we're required to enter grades like once a week type of thing, but making the grades actually mean something rather than just reevaluating how I'm teaching. And so assessments is one of them, and how we have to do common assessments, but I do fewer, like shorter, like quiz, like formative-based assessments, and then project-based summative assessments to evaluate skills and higher levels of learning for students, and looking at that. And then another thing that really stood out to me in Utah, or at least in my district, we do the AB schedule, the block schedule, so we have 80-minute class periods, which is a long time for students to be in a classroom. And so actually with what I've learned from Finland, and then in a culmination from visiting schools in South Korea, I've created lessons, units, reviews that get kids moving using a Korean variety show, but using the lessons from Finland in order to help kids review and learn.
We know that change takes time, and so not all lessons can be implemented immediately. So which lessons would you like to implement in the future based on what you've gleaned from your experience in Finland and from the work of Pasi Sahlberg?
I'll answer that. I'm a special education teacher at a middle school in Salt Lake, and I really want to help my school focus on the whole child and be more aware of what those needs are beyond just their academic needs. I also hope that I can teach my children with alternative methods in terms of gaining their skills that they need to be successful in our society, but not always with just test assessments, paper and pencil, or even computerized assessments. So I try to look for ways to create, similar to what Marinda does, projects that kids can show understanding through rubrics and other types of measures rather than just the academic assessments. And also the other thing I'm trying to incorporate is more globalized education, helping my kids better. I mean, I teach mainly language arts and reading. I do co-teach one social studies class, but helping my students be able to recognize that they are part of a huge world. A lot of my students never have left their neighborhoods, so they don't really realize where they fit in the world and how, even though we're different from other countries, we have a lot of similarities as well. So I'm trying to help them do that through the units I create.
About Russ and then.
So, do I need it? Okay. Usually I'm told to be quiet or quieter. So one of the things that we're doing at our school that I think was huge in Finland and across Scandinavia was this idea of getting out, of connecting with nature, of this sort of green activity way far and above, recess. And so at my school, several of us are designing a curriculum that we're hoping to get passed through our district in a way of getting the kids out into the world, figuring out how they connect to their environment, but also sort of reconnecting to the outside, especially in the upper grades. We just don't see that. We just don't see any movement that is, above and beyond kickball in a gym, and that's just, in my mind, unacceptable. So we're trying to incorporate some green movement. I guess we do need mics.
Teacher voices aren't enough. One of the things that really impressed me is I actually was teaching in the gifted magnet program in my district for the last 12 years. But I also had a daughter who was dyslexic and really struggled through the education system. And so I was interested in how special ed was so different in Finland than what I had experienced with my own daughter and what my job right now entails. And so right now I am going out to schools and working with schools to say, what are you doing to give an equal education to all the students? And I'm finding the teachers are very frustrated that by the time they're in 5th and 6th grade, they're so far behind, and our numbers for special education are going up, and there's just not the help. And as we talk to the teachers in Finland, when students need help, they have these special education teachers who have a master's degree who pull the students out and work with them when they need the help. And so if a parent's concerned, or a teacher, the next week they're meeting and they're getting this help for the student, where I see that it's, well, you gotta try this help with the child for 6 weeks and then come back and see us. And it seems like we're waiting and waiting, where we need to work with these students early on, have early indicators, and get the students the help that they need. The other thing I thought today that was so interesting when I was listening to Pasi up at the Capitol was that to be an elementary teacher, you have to be able to sing. And that's one of the requirements you teach in the elementary grades, is that you sing and that you can play an instrument, that the singing is so important. And we know that if students are singing, it's another modality for them to learn in, and that they remember those things, and you catch more students with their learning. And so I would like to see more of a requirement coming from our legislators to say, okay, we need to look at putting the arts back in the schools again. They're being taken out, and how important they are to the students' learning, and then again to look at the special education. What does it mean? Are we being equitable to all students in our classrooms? With our large classes, it's hard to get to all those students and to help them all. And as I was doing some of the numbers with some of the class size over in Finland with their special education teachers, and they're different than, they have special teachers that are helping, and then they have special education teachers like we're familiar with. You know, sometimes it's 1 to 17 ratio in a school where the kids, you know, they're getting more help. And that was very impressive to me.
Thank you. Oh, sure.
You mentioned that they're pulled out for help as they need it. So when Pasi was talking about having them come into the classroom, I'm wondering how that's working. Are they really being pulled out for more help, or is there a teacher that's coming in and offering more help?
From my understanding, they do both, so that they're not being pulled out of their instruction, not missing their work. That is one thing that I've noticed in our schools, that a lot of students are pulled out during direct instruction, and so they're missing the curriculum and getting further behind because they're getting help to help them catch up to where they're supposed to be. So these teachers are pulling them out and helping them. And what was also impressive is that the students are asking for it. So one of the roles of the primary teachers is to teach these students that, yes, it's your responsibility to learn, and that if you're not learning, you need to take control of that, and you need to come and tell us. And so it's not a stigma like we have in a lot of schools here, where if you go out for special education, it's the students asking, and it's then that, you know, it's expected that you will go out at some time to get that help.
More than 50% of students spend some time in special ed in Finland at some point. They may not, it may be when they're real young, it may be, you know, but it's more of an open door than it is here in the States.
Pasi identified that we have a lot of systems here of education. And consider for a minute, what are some of those macro changes within the systems that we have on the district level, on the state level, on the university level, that we could, what changes could we make on those systems level to better implement the lessons that we learned from Finland?
One of the things I was going to suggest is that I was impressed with in Finland. When I first started teaching in 1987, my professor from the university showed up, I think, twice. And from what I saw, in the pre-service training of teachers, they were dissected by multiple people on seemed like a real regular basis. It seemed much more like medical school, where you go on rounds with the doctors. What I saw in some video is that, you know, there's multiple people observing a teacher teach, and I had these people. My professors come in. One professor came in twice the whole time I was doing my in-service. My cooperating teacher, after 2 weeks, left, and I was on my own. The other thing that I noticed too is that we have such a competitive. We have this feeling especially in our state, that we need more competition. And I think that is the opposite end of the spectrum, where we've got so much competition in our schools. It's crazy, from my perspective. It seems like we're getting a little more collaborative in our system as we've instituted, you know, PLCs in our schools, professional learning communities, and we're moving in that direction. But I remember when I first started teaching also, there was a faction in my department, and they didn't like to share stuff with one another. And it seems like in Finland, people aren't as competitive, it seems like, in their profession. They seem to want to get better by the synergy that takes place as you collaborate and think together. And too often in our communities, it's guarded, because we feel like if we start getting graded based on how our students do, I can't share a whole lot with my compatriots, because I might be evaluated based on their scores and my scores. And so I think we need to have more of that pre-service, master's degree level, dissecting what the teacher's doing, the pedagogy on a daily basis, and having more collaborative processes going on than what's happening right now in our schools.
Anne-Marie?
I think one of the things on a macro level we can think about and should think about is addresses one of the issues that Dr. Sahlberg brought up, that being trust. We heard it across Finland from the highest levels to the, not that people at school are lowest, but across the spectrum. And I think it's not, as I see it, Finland did not simply say, oh, now we trust you teachers, go for it, do whatever you want. They created conditions for trust. They changed their teacher education system. They required master's degrees. They invested in teachers. They're choosing and training quality people. And then that creates the condition for trust. So I know that we could make more efforts to doing so here on a school, on a district, on a state, and certainly a public school, higher ed partnership, require or provide better training for our teachers, higher standards for our teachers, in order to create those conditions of trust. And I think that might assure some of our legislators and leaders who want to be very hands-on. It might release the grip that some of us feel in education.
Our final question, and I'm going to give Jesse the chance. Oh, sorry. Sure. Briefly, though.
Yes.
I saw a very small sample of teachers, so I wouldn't pretend to say what I saw. But I think what I heard Dr. Sahlberg say was, we're not just choosing the geniuses. It's not based on IQ, that they're looking for lots of qualities of educators. I think we're getting better research showing that not only does one need to be a good teacher and to have content knowledge, but one needs to be able to make connections with students. One needs to be able to motivate, and one has to have the heart, so to speak, to serve in that way. And what I'm hearing him say is that's what Finland is seeking. And again, that, to me, those are conditions of trust. We're vetting and screening people so well that the public will trust those people.
I have a system level recommendation idea for you that you can do that doesn't cost anything and will change everything. You know, Finland is, as you have probably learned already, that Finland is a strange place, that we do things that people often don't do. And one of the things we do that nobody else is yet doing is that we have an annual day to celebrate failure. It's October 13th every year, that we celebrate failure everywhere in our school system and the workplaces and homes and everywhere, and try to emphasize how important it is that failure is part of our life, and failure is often the kind of a starting point of learning something new. And I think that in your system that you are focusing too much on success, and you're trying to penalize those who fail or make mistakes. And if our young people grow up in an environment where they are afraid of failing and make mistakes, it's a wrong way to go. And that would be something that it's very easy to do. Just announce an annual day of failure here in the state of Utah and have a program where you spend a day or half a day in every school and university and classroom talking about how important it is, and it doesn't really make you any worse person if you fail sometimes, or how important it is to try new things in a new ways and fail and come up again and learn from those things. It will change everything. And you know, I made this proposal in the other state in the East Coast, and I said that, you know, this could be a good idea for you. Somebody in the audience stood up and said that we have already a day of failure. It's the second Tuesday of every. It's the first Tuesday every second year in November. And I said, what is that day? Why do you do it every other day? I said, because it's an election day. And I said, you can do much better than that. Just seriously, have a campaign for everybody to celebrate the failure and make it part of the education system here. And as I said, it will change everything.
I love that idea. I fail at a lot of things. The final question, and we're going to start with Jesse on this question. In the afterword of Lessons 2.0, Sir Ken Robinson states, the main theme of Finnish lessons is that transforming education is about creating the best conditions for young people to become engaged learners, fulfilled individuals, and compassionate, productive citizens. What are the core things we can focus on to generate these outcomes here in Utah?
So I believe that some of the things that stood out to me as an elementary school teacher with the Finnish education system is, of course, the trust in teachers and the professionalism that they're looked to as leaders in the profession. And I think that that is the most important thing that can create those conditions for the kids when the teachers are given the time to collaborate and to contribute in meaningful ways to the profession, rather than our collaborative times in our district anyway have been dedicated to reviewing data for common assessment. So we've been giving a voice, and our principal is very supportive at our school, but it's not that way at a lot of schools, that the collaborative time should really be dedicated more to focusing on how to better teach the kids and how to be creative and develop ideas and curriculum that's going to be inspiring to the teachers, and then allow them to inspire and motivate their kids to give their best. And then another thing that stands out to me as well as an elementary school teacher that I see happening in our schools is the mindset that teachers should adhere strictly to a prescribed reading program. And that to me is just one of the scariest ideas, that could be the best that we could give to our kids to help give them the passion for learning that we want them to have. And so I just believe that giving our teachers the trust and valuing the strengths that they have to do those things to contribute to our profession is important. And then also making sure that standardized testing and the pressure that comes along with that doesn't displace the subjects that aren't tested in school. So we do see it happen where the arts get pushed out, maybe social studies isn't emphasized as much, and the arts and music and things like that, when they're integrated, those are what really engage children on a deeper level and allow them to invest more of themselves in their learning. So,
Arinda and Russ briefly, and that'll end our panel.
Okay, just briefly. At my school, at Lake Ridge, I found that I found a lot of parallels with what was going on in Finland and what was happening at our school as far as teacher autonomy, giving the teachers the trust in their curriculum, in their specialty, and allowing us to be creative and to explore new ideas, and also what Jesse was just saying, we emphasize art and music. I mean, at least I think once a month, once or more every other month, students are on a field trip to a choir festival, a band festival, an orchestra concert. We have concerts, we have drama festival, performances on a regular basis, and it's emphasized within our school, and which is reflected in our scores as one of the top schools in the state. And I think those lessons that we can learn from Finland, if we can implement them more in schools, giving those teachers the autonomy and the freedom to know and to do what's best for their students, creating those positive learning environments, I think we can find more success.
Our final comment.
I just need to put out one quick, push for connecting with your students. I realize for those of us who are secondary ed, we're looking at 200, 250 plus students. I cannot emphasize highly enough how important it is that we are learning students' names, that we are learning what is happening in their lives. I realize that for many of you, that time means that you feel like you're going to be losing curriculum time or content time. You won't. Learning their names, learning who they are, learning their struggles, finding out who they are, that connection will help you make up the time in your content, and it will make a world of difference. We saw it in Finland, and I see it in my own school, and I just can't emphasize that connection highly enough.
I'd like to reiterate that. I stand here today because a teacher named Kathy DeMall took interest in me as a 10th grader and said, hey, you like books, you like to write, what are you doing? You need to take this class.
Yeah.
I would not be here today if it wasn't for a teacher who took that interest
Right.
in a blue-collar kid whose
Right.
parents never went to college, whose parents just said, be good, get good grades. So,
But how many is that true for? I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like, how many of us had that moment with a teacher that said, you are better than this. You can achieve something. I believe in you, and I'm not going to let you fail.
perfect way to end. Thank you, panel.